And I'm excited for today for a couple of reasons. So many reasons, and mainly our guest Brandi Hudson, had reached out to me, and I always love it when the universe combines work to help others, that warmth, that light, when people cross paths. And so I'm excited about today's interview. I'm glad to be back after a week kind of transition with the kids ending school, them going to a camp, not liking it, refusing to go. Basically, reality. Reality as someone that worked so hard to get to the life I have today that is with my children, using everything I've learned in present day moments. But the reality, it's challenging. It's challenging to merge daily obligations and what is presented, I'm putting that in quotes, as a podcast host, author, attorney, and most of all, mother and Kundalini yoga teacher. Meaning, you know, our mind will have us think we have to present in a certain way. And it was causing stress because the schedule is off with their dad. Normally, when I schedule interviews, they are either in school with their dad or the expected thing was camp. And so they are here. And I decided, you know what? This is the merging of a whole bunch of recent learnings in this level 2 lifestyles Kundalini yoga training. This is the movement of my life today. The reality is I do these other things professionally, but I'm first and foremost a mother, and I'm not going to have any shame at all if mothering in this moment affects any of the quality, the content of this, because truly the message is for the next generation, and we're going to go with the flow. To successfully write, release, and have Home is Within You published, receiving a lot of awards this week in particular. On Monday, there was something, and then I'm going to San Diego on Friday for the Next Generation Indie Book Award. That adds to the flavor of the week, meaning mom, kids out of school, not in camp. I'm doing a podcast interview. My kids are here. And then as author, I have to be all ready and in a gala dress on Friday night. And that's the reality. That's what, when we do choose to follow our heart and love within, we can just be. We can just be in all those roles instead of letting our mind convince us we have to be, and what is perfection in any one of them. So I'm following my heart. I'm not stressing out. I'm not going to cancel on Brandi. I said, I'm going to do this. I know my limits. I know I will cut back as long as I'm not sabotaging my soul and the callings for this work. And today is merging everything beautifully. So thank you, Brandi, for still being here and going with the flow.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for really leaning into all those things, right? I think we sometimes do think of our lives as these separate parts. And part of the work that I do is really around it's very holistic, right? Like some people want a professional coach and then a health coach and then or they think of their life in terms of this is my health and this is my job and this is my family and these are my relationships. And it's impossible for those things to be separate because you are just one whole being. And so the more we lean into that, the more beautiful resonance we have with ourselves and the more
Right.
we align with who we're meant to be, right?
Right. And the home within me that I built comes, it is alive and kicking in the present day mothering moments. And I share some of those in episodes I call story time on the podcast, and in things I write. I just love it. I just love being, a more present mom.
Mhm.
And, but the reality, I mean, there's a different way of implementing a home within in the presentation to the outside world.
Mm.
And we can have our kids trying to go to bed in the room next door and sitting in one room meditating. That doesn't need to be like a fragmented, and they can come and join. And if we're interrupted, it doesn't mean we're a bad meditator
Right.
or a bad mom. It all is truly getting out of those fragments, like you said, in our mind and merging them.
Yeah.
So I will be recording when my kids are here, and I will be teaching Kundalini yoga also when they are out and about, whether it's on the beach or Zoom, instead of thinking that it has to be in separate time when they are not with me.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
I
Okay.
love that. I love that.
And today, so we are going to focus on choosing love over fear and judgment. That is the way that we can take a first step in banning shame. And I talk a lot about that in different episodes. But the more we do this, like I did with these roles, the more of a sense of a home within, of a home base that we have within our bodies and minds. And those thoughts that in like A Course in Miracles, they call it attack thoughts. In 12-step recovery, character defects. Those thoughts can take less of a ride, and we can observe them a little bit more. So today's guest has figured that out in her own beautiful way. Brandi Hudson is, I love her title, a happiness expert, coach, and speaker. She's dedicated to empowering individuals to live the life of their dreams. She has 20 years of experience in corporate leadership roles, and she found her true calling in guiding high achieving individuals, especially entrepreneurs. It's funny that, I mean, this is exactly what we were talking about, especially women that are in this venture capital or venture backed companies to cultivate authentic happiness and fulfillment. So merging those roles, right?
Yes, absolutely.
She has a proprietary BASE process or base process that we'll have her elaborate on if she would like. It's beliefs, alignment, self awareness, and emotional resilience. I love that. And as a happiness expert, a incredibly unique blend of spiritual wisdom and practical tools to help individuals tap into the quantum field and align with the laws of the universe. I love it. So, my first question, okay, what does the word home evoke in you?
Oh, I love that. First and foremost, Nadia, thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I'm really excited for this conversation. I think when I think of home, it evokes so many things in me, right? It's so beautiful. Like I think of home as a child, and I think of um, being with my parents who were very young when they had me. And there was a lot of movement, for lack of a better word. Sometimes it felt like chaos, but right, there was a lot of like trying to figure out, right? Like, was I going to be with my grandparents or was I going to be with them, and how we can get to all the things. And they really worked very hard to send me to kind of private schools. And so there was a lot, but they were far away from our home in Detroit. And so there was always
Mm,
a lot going on. And they managed to keep all the balls in the air, which I'm very grateful for. But it wasn't always as settled, right? As
right.
um, as I try to do now in this place and time. And then I think of home kind of in my present day. And I've worked really hard. I have a 7-year-old son and a husband
Yeah.
of nearly 10 years in January. And really trying to have think of home as wherever we are, right? When the three of us are together, it really is home, and that can be on vacation, it can be walking through a national park, or it can be like here in our home, right? And it's a place
Mhm.
of solace and a place of peace and a place of love, and there's lots of joy in that home. Yes.
And in your heart, have you created that sense of home, and or what, like, how it does shame show up and separate you from these moments of being present? I just believe that shame is the strongest, one of the strongest emotions that separates us from that sense of having that,
Yeah.
whether in our surroundings or in our heart.
Yeah,
And
I'd love to talk about that. So, shame is for sure, right, by all accounts, the densest of all emotions, right? So, when we have shame about anything that has happened in our life, it really disconnects and separates us from like who we are meant to be in this lifetime. And so, for me, I've done a ton of work around shame, right? Like, I used to have a lot of shame about, right, like if I think back, the schools we went to were very fancy and we didn't have a lot. And I always, like, I didn't want the kids to always come to our home because it wasn't as big as theirs. It wasn't in the same fancy neighborhood as theirs.
mm,
And there was always kind of this disconnect, right, between who I was and my experiences and what I wanted them to be. And in that, there is
mm.
shame, right? And so, really,
How do you
or
define shame? Like, how did it
something that you
feel to
would
you before we talk
prefer.
about the effect? Yeah.
Yeah, I think of it as an energy of not wanting someone to have an awareness about something about you, something that has happened to you, or something that you have been a part of, and
So
you
it's
would much
fear.
prefer. Well, I think fear is a little bit of a different emotion, but yes, I mean, I kind of like
Yeah.
there are nuance between the two, but I really
Right.
think of it as like not wanting the world to know something, right? And fear, I mean, I won't go into fear, but that's how I kind of outline shame. And so, I think, right, the opposite of it is I always say to my clients, and when I'm speaking, this idea of shame is really um, interesting because there are basically 8 billion people in the world that have something that they would prefer no one knew about them. And instead of us all taking a step back and saying, well, why don't we all just like be our most authentic selves and
Right.
share with each other? We're all trying to keep our
Yeah.
thing to ourselves. And my husband, when I didn't know him at the time, but out of undergrad, he worked for the CIA, so he had top secret clearance. And I was like, "Oh, how do you get top secret clearance?" I was so intrigued by this, and I'm like, "Do you have to have this like perfect background, et cetera, et cetera?" And I am not speaking for the CIA, but what my husband said at the time was like, "No, it is actually about." Being willing to share anything about yourself so that this other countries can't hold it against you. And
Oh, I see.
and that was like this really beautiful aha for me. That's really what life is, because you can only have shame if you believe that someone else can have power over you by knowing this
Right.
information about you.
Right. Dr. Stephen Polter, who I interview regularly, says it's a secret belief that we are
Exactly right.
flawed.
Exactly right.
And
And
so
once we get in that
here's the
space of
secret. Yeah.
right. And once we own in our most authentic way all of our experiences and talk about them in this really open way, there is, I believe, I've done a lot of work around it, nothing that anyone could ever say about something that has happened in my life that would put me in that place of shame, because I just really share my life out loud, because I have found first and foremost all the things that I had shame about when I was younger, when I finally was like, okay, I'm just going to like tell everybody, I'm going to share it. No one ever cares as much as you think they would have. Like, you think you're going to
Mhm.
say the thing and they're going to be like, oh my gosh. And they're
But it
really
goes
not.
deeper even. You brought it up at the beginning. It
Yes.
goes,
Go ahead.
yes, people will relate to those things, right? And no
Absolutely.
one cares, right? But it also goes to this part of the human mind that that is leaning towards judgment, and us getting to a point of like of noticing it and then stopping it, because
Tell me
we all
more.
struggle.
I want to make sure I
we
understand.
we all struggle in this thing called life, right? So
Oh,
what is the characteristic of the human being that that judges struggle? That judges um, whatever act somebody did, that wants to judge. That is the survivalist mode in us, that on extreme, that we have to judge to survive.
yeah, but I see what you're saying. Sorry, I wasn't tracking in the beginning, but I think that's looking at it from the other person's perspective, right? And I really try to kind of approach my life from my own perspective, right?
Right.
Like judgment really only comes to you when you are sitting in
Yourself.
judgment of yourself, right?
Yes.
And the more that you can be accepting of yourself, being authentic in your discourse with others and in your exchanges with others, then the less likely you are to be in receipt of judgment, right? Because the world is really just mirroring back to you kind of
Uh-huh.
who you are, right?
And you're hitting it on a nail. You're less likely to judge others. You're less likely to
Right.
project
Exactly.
shame
And
onto
your judgment
others.
of others is really your deep judgment of
Exactly.
yourself, right? And
Right.
so it's just this very circular experience that we're having in the world. And that pattern cannot stop until you deeply understand it. And then
And
when you
go
understand it
within.
and you get the lesson, and then you reconcile that you are not your judgments, that you are
Yes.
just this beautiful soul that's being put here to experience life in this place of joy, then
Exactly.
you can move away from that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you touched a little bit upon it, of how shame showed up initially as a child,
Yeah.
and moving around, and these worries that your home would be exposed, and how did that then kind of set some beliefs in stone, as a youth, and how did that kind of affect the rest of your life? And
Yeah. I think, right. I think stress or trauma, whether it's little t trauma or big T trauma, it directs you in one or two ways. It's either like debilitating or it really is a strong driver until it isn't, right? And I think for me, this idea of wanting to have a life that was like so much bigger than the life that I grew up with was really a driver for me, right? So I was so committed to being excellent in all of the things, right? So I was a scholar athlete and captain of the team and got a full ride and also got academic scholarships and went to a top 20 college and became a manager at a young age. And so I was just really driven for, how do I create this life that is different from my life now, this life that is doesn't have these same worries that I saw my parents have. Like I said, they
I
kept all the
see.
balls in the air, but there was all of this kind of concern, if will the balls stay in the air. And so I was very driven, and how I got to this place, which I'm grateful for, but you start to realize that there's no accolade that you will ever achieve that will replace the emptiness that you feel, because you're trying to create this thing to demonstrate to the world that you've made it, whatever that means, like
Right.
quote unquote. And so then when you step back and you realize, like, oh, there's no amount of success, there's no future promotion, there's no amount of money, there's no perfect mate, there's no being a mom, none of that really shifts you as a person. And then when I realized that, that's when I started doing some really deep work. I think, to your point earlier, I had spent a ton of time kind of reading. I've always been obsessed with human potential since I was little, right? So I similarly could quote Course in Miracles, and I loved all of these kind of spiritual leaders, but I hadn't really implemented a lot of the work. I just knew it, right? And so when I made that shift, that every single day I was going to work with myself to align with
Hmm.
my highest self, that was kind of my tipping point.
And when was that?
That was just before Charlie was born. So
So your
about,
soul, that was your soul, that was your truth
yes. And
calling
I
and
also read a
choose the
book.
love, as I started.
Say it
You were
again.
choosing love
Yes.
over the fears and judgments. You were following that soul calling. And so then how did things you knew, like my truest form is infinite, whole, divine, complete, and these are just thoughts. How did you get there?
I think through just consistent practice, right? Just every day, my base model that you talked about, I put that together because that is how
Okay.
I moved through to this other side in my life, right? Like really examining what are the beliefs that I hold, right? Like how am I, what alignment am I in? Like vibrationally, like what frequency, how much self-awareness do I have about myself and
Can
how.
you give an example so we can leave the listeners with a step by step, just a sneak peek into the work that you do
Yeah.
with the
An
base?
example, like with a client or with
However you'd
myself.
like.
Yeah. Okay.
A base process, just and as much as you want or as little.
Yeah. I think, okay, just recently, right? I had someone come to me and um, they were concerned about how to run their business. She's an entrepreneur. She had a lot of business coming in, but didn't feel as though she wasn't making as much money as she needed to. Right. And so in this process, we like took a step back and we really think about like, what are the beliefs you have around like how much money you're worthy of making, right? So most of her
Mm.
clients were really, really wealthy people, and she was like trying to figure out how to make ends meet. And so there's somewhere
Mm.
in that where there isn't this fair exchange, right? Like if you are really busy, you have a waiting list a mile long, and all of your clients are doing very well, then you should at least be able to kind of like
Right.
make this work. And she was just like, I don't know. I can't figure it out. And we realized like, what are your beliefs you have about the business that you do and how much you should be compensated for that business, right? And then
Interesting.
in this work, we go like really deep around that. And so figuring out her beliefs, which I won't share directly, and then like what are you in alignment to? Like, do you believe that you have to work day and night all the time to get what you're looking for? Or do you think that um, life should come to you? Life should be
Hmm.
easy. I always tell my clients, like, we should be in this place of like, my success is inevitable, right? Like, knowing that if we have these beautiful dreams, they're going
Yes.
to come to us. Because why
Yes.
would we have a dream if it wasn't meant for us, right? Um,
Yes.
and then how much self awareness do you have around the part that you're playing? Because I think oftentimes we,
Mm.
especially early in our healing journey, we really are looking external to us about how to solve this, right?
Mhm.
So if my
Yes.
husband would do this differently, if my partner in the business would show up differently, like these are all of the ways that I can have the life that I want to lead. But what we know for sure is that in the history of the world, very few people are able to change someone else who doesn't want to be changed. So therefore, we
Right.
know that the way that we change our own lives can only be through us. Like if we sit around thinking all the time, well, I'm going to get Nadia to do this, and I'm going to get my husband to do this, and I'm going to get, right? So really having the self-awareness that you have all the answers
Hmm.
that you need to change your own life. And no one else, not one other human needs to do anything different for your life to change. Now, when you change, when
That
you
is
shift,
huge.
yes, I love that. But when you change and you shift, those other people may change and shift, but they're not changing and shifting because you're calling them every day saying, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. You are inwardly focused on your own transition, right? So it was like, right, really helping her to look inward, and it isn't the business partner, it isn't the spouse,
It
it
relates
really
a
is.
lot to mindful attachments
Yes,
and
tell me more.
detachments. It's part of this life cycles, Kundalini yoga training, and I mean having the ability to mindfully detach
Mhm.
is so important and on a variety of levels. And it relates to somewhat to the roles I was talking about and how I want to deliver them. Um, but with mindfully attaching as we're creating life and showing up for things.
Yes.
Okay, I need to put you on hold because my little one just walked in. Yeah, so mindful attachment, and it requires the step you said before, that's awareness, that knowing your beliefs, right? And then the awareness, and then how we're showing up, like
Yeah.
that self-empowerment, right?
Mhm.
Then you're mindfully drawing in things and creating, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And then the emotional resilience, really, in this example, was really around, right? Like, what do we think that we are worth? And where first in our lives did that show up for us? Right. So sometimes we have these experiences in our lives where someone else changed our belief, because we're all born worthy of all that the world has to
Mhm.
offer. And sometimes adults inadvertently, sometimes directly, but shift our beliefs around our worthiness. And so the last step in this process of helping her think through about how she kind of scaled the business so that it was more sustainable for the long term was really helping her identify those times in her lives where she thought she showed up in this really beautiful way and there wasn't this kind of recognition back. And what we do is I do energy work, and then we kind of also talk through it to help people really release
A core
the
belief.
yes, and well, and release the attachment to that past experience, right?
Wow.
So that we can live in this present moment. We keep all the wisdom from those occurrences, but we release that emotional, that dense emotion that keeps
Mhm.
pulling us back to the past. And that's how patterns are created, right? Because we
Yeah.
haven't released that dense emotion. And so when we release those dense emotions like shame, fear, anger, worry, then we can live kind of in this present moment with those high vibration emotions of love, joy, peace,
I
happiness.
love it. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
thank you.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and then to end the story, she
Yeah.
ended up in a very short time increasing kind of revenue for the organization by 3x, right? Because she really was able to see that she had all the power, and that the product that it was not about the product, it was not about the partner, it was really just about this, these
Believing in
beliefs,
her own worth of
her
what she's
own
offering.
worthiness. Yes.
Well, you just helped me with an endeavor
I love
with
that.
expanding the Kundalini yoga teaching. It's exactly kind of these learnings of, yes, as a teacher. And thank you for sharing that story. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
yeah. Thank you.
Um, so with you, transforming shame into power, you use
Yes.
that technique.
Um,
And how does it show up, today? It still shows up. How does your mind separate you from that base? And in those moments when you're observing it, as a successful woman, and share what you're doing today, um, we still struggle.
well, I don't like to call it
Struggle.
struggle. I try not to
Okay,
use that, but
you're
what
right.
I do in my life, right? Like, I've done so much deep work, and my biggest learning from it was really, I think of any time that I feel off track, anytime. I mean, Nadia, I'm pretty vigilant about it. I expect for my life to always go as planned. I have that expectation. I set
Yes.
that intention every single day. And anytime in the smallest way that life doesn't go off track, I believe that God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, is trying to get my attention. And then I sit very, very still and I ask, what is the lesson in this? So if I'm walking out the door and I trip down the steps, I'm like, oh, you're trying to get my attention. And
Right.
I have like a front patio, and I will just sit there for a second and just like tune in to what it is, right? Or if I am driving somewhere, I expect that I always have a parking spot like within a very close distance. And if I don't get one, I'm like, I wonder why. Like, what is it? And so I've moved from kind of navigating these really big things, and not that they don't show up. However, I try to navigate the really small things early and often, because what I tell people is that when you don't listen to the small things, then they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So God, taps you on the shoulder, whispers in your ear, and then slaps you across the face. So like if I don't listen when
Yes.
I'm walking down the steps and trip slightly, then the next time I might fall, and the next time I might break my arm, right? And then I'll never realize like, oh, I could have listened when I
Right.
tripped the first time. And so I think my life lesson and kind of what I share with people is to be in constant communication with your highest self, right? With your knowing
Yes.
and following that. And then you don't actually have to get to a place where you feel like you're so challenged, because those challenges are just coming to give you a message. And
And that is your home within.
that
So,
is,
so describe your daily practice, and it is exactly having that home base on a daily basis, so that when it shows up, yes, it's a calling to say, what is this trigger bringing up, either that needs to be processed, or it's something as simple as slow down, right?
yeah,
But how do you maintain that, and in the morning and at night, do
yeah.
you check
You
in
have a
with
very
yourself?
rigorous process. So
Yes,
I pray every day. I meditate between 1 and 3 times every single day for
me
about 15
too.
to
I
30
thought I was
minutes.
crazy. Yes.
Yeah, we're definitely not crazy. I have a gratitude practice. So I have this little book where I write down all the things that have gone my way or that I'm grateful for every single day. And then I shouldn't say every single day. I miss some days, but I try to do very consistently. And then I have a journaling practice where I just download everything out of my brain so that I can quiet my mind. I think you spoke earlier about kind of like what is ruminating through your head, what is going on. And for me, all of those practices, right, help me to quiet my mind. And I went from having this like
Mm,
ruminating mind that was always worried and thinking about the downside and what could happen and what might go wrong. And now I am able to hear my knowing much more clearly because my mind is much quieter than it ever has been. And so all of those practices are about being in peace where I'm not thinking all the time, but that my knowing can come in very clearly.
so was there some break, some moment where you everything was building up, and then you said, I'm going to start reading about all these different learnings? Like, can you describe that pivotal change,
I know
that
everyone
moment? I
always
know I'm
wants
going
to know.
backwards in time,
No, that's
but
okay. I everyone's always like, what was the thing? And I didn't have the fall off the cliff moment that everyone
no,
is
it doesn't
always
need to
looking
be
for.
that.
I
No,
think
no.
for me, it was, I've always read about human potential since I was little, like I shared with you earlier. So I have thousands of books that I have literally read from all types of spiritual leaders. And so I
Now, let
was,
me be clear. I don't mean the fall.
okay.
I mean the pull, the
Yeah, I'm going to
soul
share
pull.
that with you.
Okay.
Yep, I'm
Yeah.
going to share it with you.
Okay.
And so I've always been doing that. And then when I was pregnant, I read a book called Conscientious Parenting. And the book said, it says a lot of things. And I've quoted this book so many times that I hope I'm quoting it right. But the part that I took away, which is the best thing that I can say, was this idea that you can't teach your child to be anything you're not. And so that was like my aha moment, like,
Mm,
oh, I need to fully embody all of these learnings because I'm not going to tell Charlie how to be. I'm going to show him how to be.
be a
And
mama.
and
Yeah.
then and that was just, he was really my magical moment that I was like, I have to fully embody all the things that I want to be and want to teach him to be. And he's a very kind soul, and he loves to meditate, and he loves his gratitude practice. And I feel very fortunate to be able to give him that at such a young age.
And you had built, this supportive, loving relationship and life that nurtured that, right? Because you were following love. You really were. And so this gift that you have, you saw it through that life growing in you, which
Yeah,
that spark, that original movement, that's what we all come from. And it spoke to you, and that comes out, I'm sure, in beautiful moments as a mom. And he's 7.
he's 7. Yes. And he's just like, yeah, he's so sweet and so kind. And similar to you, last night we don't have a caregiver right now to help us out. And last night I had a dinner with like 8 women to kind of talk about this work. So it was a beautiful salon. And I was like, okay, Charlie, like you're gonna listen to your books on your audiobook, and like I'm setting him up for what he's gonna do. And he's like, okay, can I come say hi once? And I'm like, yes, you can come say hi once. And in the end, he came down a million times, right? And he wanted to say hello and meet all the women and jump up and down. And really, at the end of the evening, it was one of the most memorable parts for them, right? Like they loved that he kept coming back, right? And in my head, it was like, how do I get him settled so that I can do the other thing? But we can never orchestrate a life or an experience better than the universe can. So that's just how it was meant to be.
I love that. We can never orchestrate an experience better than the universe can.
Never.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I can feel your home within.
I love that. Thank you.
Is there any other tips you'd like to leave? There's so much that Brandi offers. Um, and I really appreciated you sharing kind of the restlessness feeling as a child, and it what I got from it is like this: you didn't know where home was, and then you found it, you believed in yourself, and you followed that, and now you've created this outside you. But it does take that daily nurturing, and then it gets lighter, right? And
Yes.
then life becomes this gorgeous journey of our soul. And I feel your home within you, and I'm so grateful that you're helping others with happiness.
Thank you.
And please share how you can be reached.
Yes.
And
My website is Brandi with an I, brandibhudson.com. And I have a handful of free offerings that people can grab. I do a blog entry on the 1st and 15th of every month that gives really like insight about learnings that I've come up with, mostly through experiences with my clients. They're really fun. And then I have a handful of mini courses, one about boundaries, negative self talk, and one about
oh, that's
stepping into
great.
your zone of genius. So people can grab those on the website.
And the website is in the podcast notes, so check it out there for sure. You can also get a free band shame tip sheet that's really a set of mantras through my website, and then stay tuned for mid-July Kundalini Yoga also. And especially parents in recovery, please reach out to me, and please give back and support our dear parents. Thank you so much for the work you do.
Oh,
And
thank
I'm
you so much.
sending a load of warm hugs. And I think I'm going to have you again.
I love that. I'm sending you lots of hugs back, and I'm so grateful for our time together and for the work that you're doing to really shed such a beautiful light on shame so that we can start to disperse it. Right?
Yes.
Yes. It's beautiful work.
Yes. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thank you.